Hey guys, welcome to the American Tribune Live with Todd Peterson. I am your host, Todd Peterson, and we're doing something a little bit differently today. Before I get into that, a little housekeeping. You will notice the screens behind me. They are sideways. They look okay right now. They will go dark in about an hour. Nothing we can do about it. You buy things on Amazon and sometimes it doesn't work out. So in life, we got to roll with the punches. But I appreciate you joining us today because this show, and actually this series that we're about to embark on, shooting for 3, probably going to up at 4 and 5 because I don't even know how long it's going to take today to debunk just some of Kamala Harris's lies. And I'm making this video because I want to not get defensive about Trump, but point out the fact for our Democrat audience out there, would-be Democrat voters, people that are enthusiastically voting for Kamala Harris because Donald Trump is such a threat to democracy, because he incited an insurrection, because he wants to sign a national abortion ban. There's so many things that we're worked up over about Donald Trump that are just simply not true. A lot of people are heading to the polls, and unfortunately, they've already headed the polls. In some cases, a week ago, a month ago, they mailed in a ballot. I myself will be voting on Election Day in person. That is the only time American citizens should be allowed to cast a ballot. We need to make voting great again. Same day, voter ID. While we're at it, we can talk about raising the minimum voting age, talk about having a little buy-in either through income taxes or owning property, but that is a separate conversation. I will be voting on Election Day. And for those of you that have not cast a ballot yet, the show is for you if you are thinking about voting for Kamala Harris because you have been told from the media, by Kamala Harris herself, by Joe Biden, that Donald Trump is the liar. He's the egregious liar. Donald Trump exaggerates everything. He's never telling the truth. And for a lot of folks out there, you believe that. And I'm not going to get into the Trump commentary today. I'm not going to get into many of the Trump hoaxes today. That's going to be part 3 of our series. I've got to segment this up. And so today is simply going to be Kamala Harris's own statements against Kamala Harris's own statements. We're going to debunk her lies. This is an important video. This is an important podcast you share with your Democrat voting family members, friends, neighbors. Look, if you're going to vote Democrat, by all means, we live in a free country. You make decisions that you think are best for you. But I want people to be armed with the truth. If you're going to the polls voting for Democrats because you think Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, because he is, as The Atlantic wrote, Hitler and Stalin and Mussolini all combined in one, if that's where we're at this point, where Donald Trump is all 3 of some of the most megalomaniac, oh, there we go, live, and can't speak on some of the larger words right now. Donald Trump is none of those. I want to go through all of that today and more. So welcome, everybody. Again, this is a live show. Drop some comments in below. I'm going to go through what I thought were some of the most egregious lies from Kamala Harris. I'm going to miss them. I'm not going to get to all of them. Let us know in the comments below what we need to cover in addition to some of the stuff we're going to go through. So again, like I said, this show is going to be part of a 3 or 4-part series. We're going to go through all of the media lies. Today, we're going to frame up Kamala Harris's campaign lies, things she is saying about her opponent, Donald Trump, things she is saying about her own positions. We've got to cover all of that and more. So welcome aboard, everybody. Again, this is the American Tribune Live. I am Todd Peterson. I'm so glad you're here today. You know what? We've just got to get started with framing this up as everything you have been told is a lie. I mean, that's what politicians do. So again, setting aside what Donald Trump says, setting aside what Kamala Harris says, they all lie. Politicians lie because they want to get your vote. I would argue politicians go a step further, and then they try to buy your vote once they're in office. They offer you all sorts of handouts and goodies, and they forgive your student loans. But today we're talking about Kamala Harris's lies specifically, and let's listen to Bernie Sanders. I'm going to frame this up with a Bernie Sanders clip, and this is what he says about Kamala Harris's own flip-flops, and then we'll get to Kamala Harris herself.
More establishment Democrats and progressive independents, I'm the longest serving independent in American history, come together with the goal of defeating a very dangerous candidate, and that is Donald Trump. In terms of Medicare for all, I personally believe that the current system is broken, dysfunctional. Its major goal is to make billions in profits for the drug companies and the insurance companies, and we end up spending twice as much per capita on health care as the people of any other country. While they
for all single payer for health care and ending fracking, in addition to those being positions that you hold, Vice President Harris used to be with you on all 3 of them and now is against you on all 3 of them. Is she making a mistake having reversed those positions?
Look, Jake, I think what we're seeing is a coalition of people, more establishment Democrats and progressive independents, I'm the longest serving independent in American history, come together with the goal of defeating a very dangerous candidate, and that is Donald Trump. In terms of Medicare for all, I personally believe that the current system is.
All right, so you heard the language there. He's dangerous. They never back it up, but they'll tell you he's dangerous over and over again. Bernie Sanders here in the segment when he's talking to Jake Tapper on CNN says Kamala Harris is basically saying what she needs to say to get elected. Don't worry about what she actually thinks. Don't worry about what policy she's going to implement, but she's saying what she needs to get elected. Let's slide over to The View. Same sort of thing going on. The media needs to run cover for Kamala Harris. They need to because she's slipping in the polls right now. Do a better job of just covering for Kamala.
Look, I think that Kamala Harris has been running a flawless campaign, and that's why she raised billions of dollars, $1 billion. I think it's because of the momentum that she has. I think it's because people believe in her, and I think people are showing that by the amount of money that they're willing to give to the campaign.
Again, as we talk about lies, got to talk about hypocrisy. We'll finish the clip here. Notice how it's a good thing, though, when Kamala Harris raises billions of dollars. Kamala Harris, I think I just saw, spent almost $300 million in ads, social media ads, TV ads, in the month of September alone, compared to Donald Trump's $78 million. When it's a Democrat, the more money, the better. You can never have enough money in politics. Not that long ago, we were told that dark money is bad, shadow money is bad, Elon Musk handing out money to voters, or Elon Musk giving money to Trump's campaign. That's all bad because one person can decide an election. But suddenly, when Kamala Harris raises billions of dollars, do you think that is your neighbor writing a $20 check adding up that way? Of course not. This is big money coming into the Harris campaign. That's a problem. I don't know what else to tell you. That's going to be a problem. If it's bad for Trump, it's bad for Kamala Harris. But on The View, that is okay now, and it means that she's generated a lot of excitement. Now, if we go back on the excitement front, Kamala Harris was polling at less than 1% in 2020. She had been on the stage a lot. She was campaigning for president before Joe Biden was nominated. Nobody liked her when they listened to her speak. They thought her policies were too radical. They didn't find her relatable. So she disappeared. She dropped out of the 2020 race. As vice president, I'd love a comment below from a Democrat voter. What has Kamala Harris achieved as a vice president? I'm talking about policies. I'm not talking about checking off a box in that she's the first black woman in the White House. What substance has Kamala Harris offered? But again, we're supposed to be excited because she's raised a lot of money. Just understand that if Donald Trump had raised all that money, they wouldn't be framing it up as Donald Trump is extremely popular right now. He's surging in the polls. So many Americans are on board with Trump's message. They wouldn't be saying that. They'd say, where is all this money coming from? Because regular Americans are too smart to vote for Donald Trump. So again, based on the candidate, they're going to frame up the conversation differently, but let's continue.
I think we have the press to blame for a lot of this about, Whoopi, you always say you don't believe in polls. I'm with you now because I'm reading the press. First it was Kamala's not doing enough press. Then she goes on this huge press tour. She was here with us. I thought she was fantastic. She was energetic. The crowd went wild. It was electric. CNN, Democrats grow anxious. Axios, blue wall blues. Fox, Dems are scared to death. No, Dems are not scared to death. Dems are pumped. What I would like the press to talk a little bit more about is Trump is in hiding. He didn't do the 60 Minutes interview. He does not want to do another debate. He's in mental decline. Obama's speech was captivating in Pittsburgh, yet instead of talking about that, we're talking about what he said before the.
All right, again, there's only so much of The View that I can take on any given day. That is my 1 minute max right there. Kamala Harris has never been so low in the polls right now. I think this clip is from like a week ago, so it's only gotten worse. Donald Trump has never been more of a favorite to win the Electoral College. There are odds right now out there. He's at like 60, 70%. If he wins Pennsylvania, that shoots up to like 93, 94%, according to some outlets. And leftist outlets too, like 538, not a pro-Trump organization. Donald Trump is looking really good in the polls right now. And The View makes the point here. This is Sunny Hostin saying that, well, Donald Trump hasn't been campaigning. I mean, Donald Trump is doing like a speech or two every single day. He's jetting around the country. He is certainly keeping busy. He's going to McDonald's here. And I was going to get a picture of Trump and doing McDonald's behind me today. But again, the cords didn't work out. Kamala Harris was in hiding because the more she talks, the less people like her. Kamala Harris is a hard person to relate to. She laughs at awkward times. She gets angry at awkward times. She has a hard time communicating her ideas and her thoughts, and she has a nearly impossible job of defending her policies. The American people, by and large, do not want outright communism in this country. Americans like their freedom. They like keeping the money that they earn. They like a secure country. They like secure borders. They don't want wars overseas. Parents want to protect their kids and do what's right by their kids. The American people, by and large, do not like the policies that Joe Biden has offered during his 4 years and that Kamala Harris would certainly continue. And more on that in a little bit when we talk about the weird position between Kamala Harris saying I wouldn't do anything differently if I were Joe Biden right now, but also on day one, we're going to do all sorts of wonderful things that are going to fix the problems that, again, were created under Joe Biden and I wouldn't have done things differently about. So that's a problem that she's got to figure out as well here. So that's us getting started. This is how the media is framing up Kamala's demise right now. She's collapsing in the polls. The media needs to do a better job of running her campaign, essentially, is what Sunny Hassan is saying. It's not Kamala Harris's job to do interviews or campaign or persuade the American voter that her policies make sense and will be good for them. It's the media's job to simply say Kamala Harris is the person for the job because Donald Trump. We need a little bit more than that. And if you're a would-be, again, Democrat voter, you're considering voting for Kamala Harris, as we go through just the lies she has told, part 2 of this series is going to be the positions that Kamala Harris has advocated for that we expect her to implement if she were president. And we're going to go side by side of Kamala Harris's policies and substance versus Donald Trump's policies and substance. Take away the name, I would guess you agree with Donald Trump's positions 90% of the time. So that's going to be a little preview for episode 2. Again, today we're just going through the lies, and we've got to jump into it. We're 11 minutes in. Comments are saying, let's get to the Kamala lies here. I couldn't agree more. Perhaps the biggest lie from Kamala Harris, and if you are a viewer of CNN, you consume left-wing Democrat social media, there are good odds that you still think Donald Trump called neo-Nazis and white supremacists fine people. I'm starting with this clip because I can debunk it in about 10 seconds by showing you real footage of what Trump actually said in response to the horrors at Charlottesville. And so let us begin here. We are going to the presidential debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Here is how Kamala Harris framed up Charlottesville. Again, this is 7 years later, and we're still talking about this lie. Let's listen to Kamala herself, and then we'll get into it.
Remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side.
This is the line. When people think of Donald Trump, how many of you immediately go to fine people? Donald Trump called some of the worst scumbags in America fine people. And that's not even hyperbole from me. All these white nationalists, white supremacists, neo-Nazis, they're scumbags. They're losers. They have a horrible ideology. They have hate in their hearts. They are no good. Kamala Harris wants you to think that Donald Trump is propping them up. And when they were marching in Charlottesville, he called them fine people. 7 years later, if you recall, Joe Biden said the exact same thing in the debate before he got dropped in June. Snopes, a far-left outlet, debunked the claim. 7 years later, they said, no, Donald Trump did not, in fact, call neo-Nazis and white supremacists fine people. I guarantee this might be the first time you have ever seen this clip. It is unedited. It is in full. You will notice where the media stopped presenting Trump's speech. Fine people, boom, cut. Let's go to the floor. Look, Donald Trump called them fine people. Not the case. Take a listen to this clip.
And you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
All right, that's it. That is the clip that you saw, my Democrat friends. You saw Donald Trump call them fine people on both sides. Both sides, he said. He must have been talking about the neo-Nazis and white supremacists. Roll the tape. Continue, please.
You had people in that group, excuse me. I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists.
I like to talk. I like to comment. Do I need to add any comments to that? Donald Trump, in the very same press conference where he previously had said, fine people on both sides. Yep, we've all seen the clip. He very clearly points out he is not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists. I condemn them totally. They're not part of what I'm talking about when I say fine people. There were simply people, let's say on the right in this case, that wanted to preserve some of their traditions, some of their history, did not want statues torn down, parks renamed. They had other motivations than simply being skinheads and hating the other side. I don't know what else to say. I'm going to play it one more time just so it sinks in. Donald Trump disavowing neo-Nazis and white supremacists. Like I said, this might be the first time you have ever heard this. And then you got to ask the question, if they lied about this, and it is so easily disproven, what else have they lied about Donald Trump? Stay tuned for episode 3 when we go through all of the Trump hoaxes. That is a long list.
Very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white.
He said it twice. He said it 2 times.
White nationalists, okay?
There it is, folks. We just debunked the fine people hoax. And again, you don't have to take it from me, Todd Peterson, and I'm not wearing a partisan hat right now. This episode is designed to expose Kamala's flaws. This is not a pro-Trump. Trump can't do anything wrong. Trump is the second coming of the Messiah. That's not what this show is about. This show values truth. When we get to the Trump lies, we can acknowledge that Trump made a lot of mistakes in his first term. We'll get to that a little bit later, but sure, he hired the wrong people. His response to the pandemic was not great. He infused trillions of dollars into the economy. He raised the national debt. It caused inflation. Donald Trump made a lot of mistakes in his presidency. However, one of those mistakes was not referring to neo-Nazis as fine people. Again, that might be the first time you're hearing it. It's important for you to hear this, and I hope you start reflecting on, gosh, they lied about this. Donald Trump never called them fine people. I wonder what else they lied about. And that makes me go to the next hoax, January 6th. We have seen the clips. We've all seen the same edited clips. What happened in the Capitol was a tragedy. It should never have gotten to that point. When I break down the Trump hoax, though, we have to listen to FBI personnel, Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI, talk about, let's just say, people that were in the crowd, embedded in the crowd that day, might have been working or collaborating or knew a few things about what was going on. Not simple enough to say Donald Trump protesters were there and they all stormed the Capitol. It's not clean and cut like that. But the lie from January 6th, the thing that started it all, was that a police officer, multiple police officers, were killed that day. We went from a violent protest to a deadly insurrection. And on the point of insurrection, you just have to understand the narrative around January 6th is that Trump protesters, a couple thousand of them, stormed the Capitol and were threatening the entire existence of the U.S. government. And they did all that without ammunition, weapons. They weren't armed. They didn't have any coordinated plan. It was just people going into the building. Do you think, and I'm just going to ask a rhetorical question, maybe the answer is yes to you, but do you think that a mob of people without any larger plan, without any firearms, without any control of the military or the government operations, were they almost able to overthrow our country? Were the actions that day that close to getting the United States of America dissolved? I don't know about that, but the lie that they pushed was Officer Brian Sicknick. That name is also burned and etched into our memories now. Officer Brian Sicknick was killed that day. The New York Times reported that a fire extinguisher was smashed over his head. So police officers died on January 6th. That's what we were told. Let's listen to Kamala Harris. And again, that was in 2021. Here we are 3.5 years later. Here's Kamala Harris still pushing that.
140 law enforcement officers were injured that day. Law enforcement officers were killed that day.
I'm going to play it again. It was a short clip.
140 law enforcement officers were injured that day.
That part is true. Many police officers were injured that day. That part is true. But listen to the last part.
Law enforcement officers were killed that day.
Officers were not killed on January 6th. I'm going to show some video evidence in just a second. We've got some headlines, some New York Times retractions on their original reporting that said Officer Brian Sicknick was killed when a fire extinguisher was just mashed on top of his skull. That did not happen. But if you recall, the narrative around January 6th, it had to be cemented around a deadly attempted insurrection. They had to convince you that that was the case. This is, and he wasn't Senate Majority Leader at the time, but this is now Senator Chuck Schumer addressing the events less than a month later. And just listen to the language he uses.
Many horrors, but it also revealed many heroes. One such hero was Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, a New Jersey native, an Air Force National Guard veteran, a 12-year member of the Capitol Police Force who tragically lost his life during the attack. This evening, the body of Officer Sicknick will arrive at the Capitol, and he will lie in honor beneath the Capitol Rotunda. We will formally pay our respects to Officer Sicknick with a service on Wednesday. I join with my colleagues and members of the Capitol Police Force in grieving the loss of one of their fellow officers. May his memory live forever as a model of service to our nation, selflessness in the line of duty, and courage in the face of danger. On another matter entirely.
The implication, of course, and this is not to disparage police officers, the men and women that were there that day. I cannot imagine the chaos. This is simply to talk about the lie that Officer Brian Sicknick was killed on January 6th, a lie promoted by them, and they knew this. Let us go to this clip right here, and it looks like it is a little fuzzy for you all at home. Let me pull this up on my computer to read this out loud here. This is reporting from the New York Times. This is shortly after, this is January 7th. This is the New York Times introducing this narrative to the public. It was picked up, and if you're listening to Kamala Harris speak, she continues to pick it up 3.5 years later. On Wednesday, pro-Trump rioters attacked the citadel of democracy, overpowered Mr. Sicknick, and struck him in the head with a fire extinguisher, according to 2 law enforcement officials. With a bloody gash in his head, Mr. Sicknick was rushed to the hospital and placed on life support. This is a complete and total lie. Officer Brian Sicknick, and then let us go to some updated reporting here, simply did not die from injuries sustained at the Capitol. This is from the Washington Examiner. I'm just going to read this aloud as well. Officer Sicknick was responding to the riots on Wednesday, January 6th at the U.S. Capitol, and was injured while physically engaging with protesters. He returned to the division office and collapsed. He was taken to a local hospital where he succumbed to his injuries. So that is the initial reporting. The next day, the New York Times reported that Sicknick was struck by a fire extinguisher. I just read the New York Times article to you. However, in recent days, the Washington Examiner writes, CNN reported that investigators have determined that initial reports about Sicknick being hit with a fire extinguisher are not true, and that medical examiners did not find signs that the officer sustained any blunt force trauma as they struggled to build a murder case in the officer's death. And here's the next thing. Okay, turns out, I can look at the body. I can clearly not see a head injury. So then they promoted a new idea that bear spray was used against him. So now the Examiner continues, one leading theory is that Sicknick was sprayed by an irritant such as bear spray and had a fatal reaction. All right, so plan A didn't work because we can look at the body. Plan B may be a little harder to prove right away. Maybe it was bear spray. That was also debunked. And in fact, let's go down a little bit here. This is from the brother Ken Sicknick speaking on the matter, said that he texted me last night and said I got pepper sprayed twice, but was in good shape. Officer Brian Sicknick died of a stroke. And as far as the coroner, as far as journalists could determine, the stroke was unrelated to the events on January 6th. But we can't stress this enough. He was not killed by a fire extinguisher. And in fact, no police officers were killed on January 6th. It was not a deadly insurrection from the viewpoint of the government. But lest we forget that people did die on January 6th. Ashley Babbitt was an unarmed woman who was shot and killed by Capitol Police, and several other Trump supporters died unrelated to interactions with police, but had a heart attack, overdose on amphetamines. People were killed. People did die on January 6th, but it was not police officers like the media, like Kamala Harris would have you believe. This is just an outright lie from Kamala Harris. No police officers died on January 6th, just like it is an outright lie that Donald Trump called neo-Nazis and white supremacists fine people. All right. So I think we've gone through those pretty well. Would you agree at this point, Democrat viewer, the media and Kamala Harris lied to you about Charlottesville? The media and Kamala Harris lied to you about the events of January 6th, and we're going to debunk the insurrection case a lot more in episode 3 when we go through Trump hoaxes. This clip right here, though, of Kamala Harris talking about police officers dying, I think we did a good job debunking that. So let's talk about something else for a second. Let's go to more recent comments about the enemy within. Let me pull up a video file. So if you've been following the news, again, if you're worried about what Donald Trump is doing next, you're worried about the next threat to democracy, you've heard a lot of narratives around Donald Trump said that the enemy was within and that he's going to deploy the military on American citizens. And so this is Kamala Harris sitting down with Brett Baier. We've got so many clips that I've got to scroll through here. Take a listen to this interaction with Brett Baier, Kamala Harris, in her Fox interview last week.
Is as bad as you say that half of this country is now supporting this person who could be the 47th president of the United States. Why is that happening?
This is an election for president of the United States. It's not supposed to be easy.
I know, but
It's not supposed to be. It is not supposed to be a cakewalk.
So are they misguided?
All right, we've just got to talk for a second too. This entire interview, your side probably presented as like, oh, Kamala Harris owned him. Like, your old boss Tim said, I'm talking right now. Let me finish my thought. This was the entire interview. You've probably seen your clips, and I don't mean to disparage you, but did you watch the interview in its entirety? Did you see longer clips? Kamala Harris did not answer a single question. I think we might have to segue to. Let's just segue to this really fast.
Democrats voted.
Donald Trump, 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 and Donald Trump, Donald Trump.
President Biden had a fundraiser debate stage.
Let's go back to Donald
profits.
Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump.
So that happened too, but let's go back to the other clip we were talking about.
50%?
Listen,
Are they stupid? What is
God,
it?
I would never say that about the American people. And in fact, if you listen to Donald Trump, if you watch any of his rallies, he's the one who tends to demean and belittle and diminish the American people. He's the one who talks about an enemy within, an enemy within, talking about the American people, suggesting he would turn the American military on the American people.
We asked that question.
So there is the claim from Kamala Harris that Donald Trump would use and deploy the military against American citizens. That's the big claim on the clip here. But even the little things Kamala Harris lies about. She said, I would never call the American people stupid. We actually have video evidence of that happening, though. So let us pull up the clip of Kamala Harris talking about Gen Z.
I'll tell you, and I know this is a controversial topic for many of us, I love Gen Z.
But also, don't forget what we also know about that age range. They can be really stupid. That's why we make them live in dormitories with a resident assistant. With a curfew. Right?
But let's remember about when we put them in college. What do we do with them? We put them in dormitories with an RA. Why? Because they make stupid decisions. What else do we know about this population, 18 through 24? They are stupid. That is why we put them in dormitories. And they have a resident assistant.
We could debunk lie after lie just in these clips, but Kamala Harris, I would never call the American people stupid. I am so composed. Look at my response. How dare you ask the question, Brett Baier? I mean, we're not cherry picking here. These are Kamala Harris's own speeches where she's enthusiastically calling 18 to 24-year-olds stupid. And look, no disagreement from me on that one. I was an 18-year-old once. It's amazing I've made it this far in life, surviving my teenage years and my early 20s. That's not the point. The point is that Kamala Harris said I would never call them stupid. And here she is gleefully laughing about calling these kids stupid. Now, the fact about, and then a rationale too, we put them in dormitories because they don't know how to live on their own. I mean, colleges put them on dormitories because then they can charge them rent. College scam, separate issue. Student loan forgiveness, separate issue. They want you on campus because they own the buildings and you pay them rent to go there. So you pay tuition, you pay rent because you live on campus and they have cafeterias. Now you're paying for their food. It's all a racket on campus. It's not because they are stupid. Plenty of 18-year-olds that don't go to college somehow manage just fine in the real world. But there she is lying about that. But then we've got to talk about the enemy within. If you are listening and you believe Kamala Harris, you are under the impression that when Donald Trump takes over the White House, he will deploy the U.S. military against Kamala Harris supporters. That's the insinuation. That is her comment. So again, let us go to the source itself. You don't have to listen to me explain it. We'll talk on the back end here. But here is how the real conversation is going.
No, that's not what he's talking about there. What he's talking about is marauding gangs of dangerous,
Nope.
violent people who are destroying public property.
Nope.
What President Trump is talking about is that they have been attacking and maligning him from the day he came down that golden escalator. Everybody knows that's true. Kamala Harris has used language saying he's so dangerous to the country. I mean, I've had colleagues in the House say he must be eliminated. He must be extinguished.
He's literally
I mean,
talking about
this
taking
stuff
the
is over the
military
top.
and
You know
using it against Democrats. I mean, he's literally talking.
No, he's not. No,
Yes, he is.
no, he's not, Jake. No, he's not. No, he's talking about using the National Guard and the military to keep the peace in our streets.
Just a few hours after that interview, Mr. Trump explicitly called his political rivals, including former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, the enemy from within.
That's an enemy from within. That is a threat to democracy. These are bad people. We have a lot of bad people. But when you look at Shifty Schiff and some of the others, yeah, they are, to me, the enemy from within. I think Nancy Pelosi.
And that's a separate conversation. I think we'll include that in the Trump hoaxes, where Donald Trump is referring to the political class as an enemy within. Some arguments to be made there, not the point of this episode. So we're going to try to keep it tight because we're already half an hour in, and I think we've already gone through 3 lies from Harris, and I've got so many more to cover. But even in the framing of the media, they can't even keep their narrative straight. Is he talking about the American people, or is he talking about the political class? Because that's 2 very separate things. By and large, the American people make up what, like 99.9% of the population? He's not talking about the American Democrat voting citizen. He is talking about 2 things. The illegal immigrants that are criminals in this country, violent criminals. Yes, we need to do something about illegal criminals in this country. So that is Donald Trump's point. And if it takes a little military use, hey, bring troops home from Germany, bring them home from Japan, bring assets home from Ukraine. We don't need to be the police around the world when we can't even take care of our own backyard. So Donald Trump has specifically said, I'm going to round some people up or put troops on the border. You don't have to like that. You don't have to agree with that, but that is what he said. He is not talking about weaponizing the military against you, the American citizen. That is simply not true. But again, the media can't keep their story straight. You called Pelosi and Schiff enemies within. Well, what is it? Is it political class, or is it the American people? They cannot make up their mind. But you heard Kamala Harris in the Brett Baier interview. She didn't name Schiff or Pelosi or these people. She made you think that he was calling the regular American tax-paying Democrat voting citizen the real threat here. Okay. I think we got to get to flip-flops. There were the lies. We've got a lot more lies to go through, but now we've got to cover some flip-flops as well. Kamala Harris, when she was running in 2019 and 2020, when she was working as vice president under Joe Biden administration, held various positions that suddenly she no longer agrees with or says she has changed her mind. And I opened the show with a clip of Bernie Sanders basically saying she's going to say what she needs to get elected. We talked about Sunny Hostin saying the media's got to do a better job of covering for Kamala Harris, running her campaign, telling you what you want to hear. Here's Kamala Harris versus Kamala Harris. Let's take a listen.
Intend on extending a tax cut, repealing that tax bill they just passed. And also looking at estate taxes are going to have to go up.
Everything from a 70 to 80% tax rate.
I think that's fantastic. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking.
She was big on defund the police.
For too long, the status quo thinking has been you get more safety by putting more cops on the street. Well, that's wrong.
She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border.
I am in favor of saying that we're not going to treat people who are undocumented across the border as criminals. That's correct.
Abolish ICE.
Yeah, we need to probably think about starting from scratch.
She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had. A horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad.
Bidenomics is working. It's working. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. We have to have a buyback program, and I support a mandatory buyback program. My agenda includes attempting to get Congress to act, but if they don't within the first 100 days of my administration, I'm going to take executive action. Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options.
I believe it will totally eliminate private insurance.
Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on.
All right, so powerful Trump ad there. And again, maybe you like her old position, maybe you like her new position, but the point is, what is her position? What does Kamala Harris stand for right now? When I look at the Trump campaign, he has been very clear about what he aims to do as president. He wants to secure the border. He wants to bring down government spending. He's talked about bringing Elon Musk on board to do what Argentina is doing with Javier Milei, gutting the government, gutting the bureaucracy, shrinking the size of the government, stopping wars overseas. It is not America's job to police the world. That is Donald Trump's view. Kamala Harris, I don't know what she believes. Does she want to stop fracking? Does she not want to stop fracking? Does she want a secure border? Does she not want a secure border? Remember, Kamala Harris didn't visit the border until a month ago. She was named the border czar, which you would get fact checkers saying we're on Rumble and Twitter, because if you go on Facebook and you say Kamala Harris was the border czar, you get fact checked for that. So I don't know what Kamala Harris stands for when she speaks. I can see her actions. I can see what she has done in the past. I can see what gets her base excited. I can see what her predecessor, Joe Biden, has been doing. And I'm not led to think that she would do anything any different. And that gets to the next point, where I will segue to Kamala Harris is saying two contradictory things at the same time. I wouldn't change anything if I were Joe Biden. And also on day one, my administration is going to fix the problems created largely by the Biden administration, which I just said I agreed with. And so we are going in circles at this point. Kamala Harris supporting Joe Biden's agenda, and Kamala Harris also running on a new agenda to fix the agenda that she supports here. So we got a couple of video clips to talk about that and see where she stands. Kamala Harris, day one.
I am president. It will be my day one priority to fight to bring down prices, to take on the big corporations that engage in illegal price gouging, take on corporate landlords that unfairly raise rents on working families, to take on big pharma and cap the cost of prescription drugs for all Americans.
Yes, that sounds
All right, I like this guy too. Let's listen to his commentary.
awesome. The cost of all of those things has been rising dramatically, particularly over the last few years. I can't wait till she's in the White House. We're going to make her story. She's actually already in the White House quite a bit. She's the current serving vice president. Oh, yeah. Wait, what the fuck?
Just make it make sense for me, folks. What version of Kamala Harris are you enthusiastically voting for? Are you voting for the Kamala Harris that's been in the White House for almost 4 years now, and we've seen those policies play out? And maybe you had your student loans forgiven, and so she successfully bought your vote. But instead of thinking about just ourselves, let's think about what is good for the country. When it comes to just student loans and having your vote purchased from you with other people's tax dollars, people that never went to college, people that paid their way through college, people that paid off their student loans, or people that took out private loans did not benefit from that action. But you feel entitled and you feel owed to have your student debt that you willfully took on. She bought your vote. You don't feel bad about it, but that's about as far as we have gotten here. But again, you're president now. You're going to be president, hopefully not in 2025, but what do you stand for? What actual policies are you promoting? So let us continue with day one. So she's gotten asked this question. All right, Kamala, you said that on day one, you're going to do this. How do you feel about the Biden presidency? Let's take a listen.
This week that every president has to cut their own path. What is one policy that you would have done differently over these last 3.5 years than President Biden?
I mean, to be very candid with you, even including Mike Pence, vice presidents are not critical of their presidents. I think that really actually, in terms of the tradition of it and also just going forward, it does not make for a productive and important relationship.
Number one, Mike Pence will vote for Kamala Harris. I don't know if he's publicly said it. I don't listen to Pence all that often. He's kind of a nothing burger. I would guarantee he votes for Kamala Harris. He spoke out against Donald Trump's actions following January 6th because he bought into some of those media narratives. So I'm not going to speak about Joe Biden because that's not what you do. That is not an answer to the question of how do you feel about Joe Biden's policies. But we get a more direct response, amazingly, from The View of all places. And again, I think we've hit our quota. I'm maxed out on listening to the ladies on The View, but let's take a listen because this is very instructive.
If anything, Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
They've had impacts, all right. Not all of them good. Most of them horrible. Kamala Harris, very plainly speaking, coherently, for once we might add, that she would not change a single thing about Joe Biden's presidency from a policy position. And she is the same person campaigning on day one, a new path forward. When I'm in the White House, we're going to solve the immigration crisis that has been an issue the entire time under the Biden administration because we revoked all of Trump's executive orders on border security. Kamala Harris is the same person that called Trump's border wall a medieval vanity project. She derided Trump over and over again. I wish I had the clip from CNN when CNN actually called out Kamala Harris for her flip-flop on the border. So that wouldn't have changed, but now I'm going to campaign on fixing it. Inflation, she touted the Inflation Reduction Act, which they name all of these legislative pieces so inappropriately. The Inflation Reduction Act pumped trillions, I believe it was what, $2 or $3 trillion into the economy. That is going to lead to inflation because you now have a surplus of supply of dollars that will have to bring prices up. But again, she says, I wouldn't change anything, and I'm campaigning for day one. You got to square that circle somehow, and I simply cannot. Now, in the previous clip, though, the very first one we played, she talked about going against Big Pharma. This is, and I've just got some slides to show you, took some screenshots of headlines. For some reason, this is a talking point in the media, but again, we just covered Charlottesville and a police officer died on January 6th, so no surprise there. They're going to just flat out lie. It's not like they get the reporting wrong or they bury some truth in there. They just flat out lie. Let me pop this up to the screen for a second. Donald Trump announces lower out-of-pocket insulin costs for Medicare seniors. When Donald Trump was president, he capped insulin prices at $35. That was the copay to go towards your insulin. You were capped if you were on Medicare. $35 in Trump's administration. When Joe Biden took office, let's go to CNN. Their headline reads, the Biden freeze hits 2 Trump drug price rules. Joe Biden, not even quietly, like they all reported on it. Somehow they just forgot to point out the fact that Donald Trump brought insulin prices down. I think it was Joe Biden that campaigned on bringing insulin prices down. He revoked that. He got rid of the $35 maximum copay amount per month for your insulin. And then what does Joe Biden do a little while later? President Biden saves the day. He caps the cost of insulin that could benefit millions of Americans in all 50 states. His White House put out this press release. And again, they're not even trying to hide it. They could have said, we're going to cap it at $30, $40. Shoot, being a Democrat, they might as well have just said it's going to be free. But he took the same $35 that Donald Trump had that he then revoked, and he reintroduced it, and he's presenting himself as some sort of savior. So when Kamala Harris talks about going after Big Pharma, this is the same Big Pharma, by the way, that miraculously had an mRNA vaccine ready to go during the pandemic, and they printed money. Pharmaceutical companies, Pfizer, who was the other one there? They printed billions of dollars to promote their vaccine. J&J came out with it. They all had something ready to go, just somehow. They somehow created a brand new technology within the span of a couple months, and they pumped it out to all of you. And by the way, the government purchased every single COVID vaccine that you got for free that the government paid all these people for. So yes, good job going after Big Pharma. All right. I think it's time that we get to the heavy one. If you are a Democrat viewer, when you think of the idea of abortion, your emotions might be getting a little high already. You might be tensing up. You're thinking, oh my God, we're talking about abortion. You've been trained by the media, trained by Democrat politicians to react at a visceral level, just in your gut. You shut down and you just think, oh, abortion. We got to have women's reproductive rights. Remember, I just talked about COVID. Kamala Harris, a tweet of hers just resurfaced where she was praising the Biden administration. Again, she wouldn't have changed a single thing about Joe Biden's presidency. Praised the Biden administration for introducing, remember, the vaccine mandate for companies with over 100 employees. She liked that. And by the way, that would be able to pay out Big Pharma tons of money again, because how many companies with over 100 employees, boom, you got to get a vaccine to come to work, even though you work from home right now. It's free for you, the employee, but don't make no mistake, Big Pharma's getting paid for that. She touted that. And then at the same time, she wants you to believe that women have the right to do what they want with their body. I don't know how to say this any more clearly. Kamala Harris she wanted to mandate, were it not for a 5-4, maybe a 6-3 Supreme Court decision that said, no, you actually can't mandate vaccines in this country. She wanted to tell every single woman in this country, you will inject the substance into your body. And now she's out here on the campaign trail, as they always do. They've been running on this issue for years. A woman has a right to do what she wants with her body. Maybe I'm missing something. Let me know in the comments. Follow up later on if you're listening. You're not live, but you listen to the podcast later. Let me know on Spotify. Let me know on Rumble where we're streaming, on YouTube, on my Twitter account. You let me know what I'm missing. If it's a woman's right to choose what to do with her body, does it make sense that Kamala Harris was going to tell you what to put into your body? And just the other thing with abortion, this is not the abortion episode, but there are just so many questions around the narratives of what you're led to believe when it comes to abortion. Nobody is talking about the woman's body. Yes, the baby miraculously develops in the woman's body from conception to birth. That woman's body is a miraculous home for new life. When Republicans want to limit abortion, or when anyone wants to limit abortion, you don't have to be a Republican necessarily, but when anyone talks about limiting access to abortion, they're not saying you as a woman don't get to decide what to do with your body. You already decided. Your acts in the bedroom, wherever it may be, led to the development, the creation of new life. You already had your reproductive rights. You chose to reproduce. That is the consequence of having sex. Sometimes new life is created. And it is a miracle that it happens. The fact that we are not all shouting at the rooftop saying, we've got another one, this is a miracle. We create new life as human beings, as mammals, and it is a wonderful thing. I'm not talking about your reproductive rights. You had access to your reproductive rights. You chose to reproduce or not. We're talking about the rights of the human baby inside of you. Two separate issues altogether. But the way Kamala Harris frames up the debate, again, I'm not trying to change your mind on abortion right now. We're focusing on the lies of Kamala Harris surrounding the narratives of abortion in this country. This is Kamala Harris. We're going to go back to the debate. This is what she said. This is how she framed it up to the American people against Donald Trump.
As I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprise.
She told the truth. She said that you're going to hear a bunch of lies. Buckle up.
Fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade.
It is not a bad thing that a president selects people that are going to pursue his ideology. Now, when it comes to the Supreme Court, it should be really simple. Do you promise to abide by what is written in the Constitution? You're not going to find things that are not there, like they did with Roe in the 70s. There is nothing in the Constitution that talks about abortion. And so the fact that you have any justices defending that is made up. I simply want justices on the Supreme Court that will uphold what is written, what is explicitly stated in the Constitution. There we go. I think we lost the TV, didn't we? That is all that should matter here. But were they outraged when Barack Obama selected a Supreme Court justice according to his ideology? Absolutely not. So again, they're framing this up like you should be mad that Trump picked these certain Supreme Court justices. Flip it around. They're not mad when their side does it. So again, you got the disconnect there, the hypocrisy. Let's continue.
And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal.
There's no such thing as a Trump abortion ban. Let's spell this out really plainly. Donald Trump, when he nominated Supreme Court justices, yes, they had to go through the test, as I often do on the Republican side, of what are your thoughts on right to life? Okay, no secret there, not hiding anything. But when Roe v. Wade was overturned, here's a fun fact. There have been more abortions. There were more abortions in the year immediately following Roe's overturn than there had been under Roe. No one is getting denied access to abortions if they need it. More abortions than ever before after Roe was overturned. Nobody talks about that. I'm telling you right now, my Democrat friend, what you are being told is a lie. People have access to abortion still. It just shrank the window in which many cases they were allowed to do that. And again, we are a constitutional republic, which means when Roe was overturned, Donald Trump simply said, I want this to be a state's issue. In my perfect world, everything is a state's issue. The smaller the federal government, the better. You have more rights in Minnesota. As a Minnesotan where I live, you get to decide what kind of abortion access do we want to have. I don't agree with what Minnesota's abortion policy is, but it is different as a Minnesotan than what you have in Iowa or Alabama or California. It is a state's right. If you don't like it, you can campaign at the state level, or you can move states if you don't agree with it. Donald Trump, abortion bans are simply not a thing. It is individual states, individual voters deciding what kind of policies, what kind of morality they want to have play out at the state level. This is a good thing. We should all be celebrating the fact that the federal government got a little bit weaker and handed power back to the state. That's how the system was supposed to work. But let's continue after she just completely lies about Trump abortion bans.
For a doctor or nurse to provide health care in one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that.
That's false. That is false on every level. Every single state has carve-outs for incest, rape, protecting the mother's life. Flat out lie.
Means a survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body.
Except when it comes to a vaccine, then you don't get to decide. So again, I don't believe her when she says this. This is a lie. She's not standing on any firm philosophical ground. Abortion is a popular issue among the electorate. Even most Republican voters lean a little bit further to the left when it comes to the issue of abortion. But this is simply not a principled argument saying he wants to take away your bodily autonomy, women have the right to choose. We talked about during COVID as just one example when you didn't have a choice. And when you want to flip it around to men in this country, when I turned 18, if you are a mother out there and you're going to have an 18-year-old son or he will grow up to be 18 in this country right now, you have to register for the selective service. I have zero bodily autonomy. If the United States wanted to implement the draft tomorrow, because we are God knows where around the world starting conflicts, boys between the ages of 18 and 35, I want to see, maybe 18 to 28, don't have a say in what happens to their body. They become cannon fodder for the regime. So just understand, again, not principled in the sense that even women have control over their bodies, but men do not have control over their bodies when it comes to the draft and registering for the selective service. Let's continue.
Have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Which is also weird because she wants to legislate what you can do with your body. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say it's not the government's job to regulate this. By the way, we are going to basically regulate it. I'm not making this up. I have someone in my immediate orbit, I'll say, that expressed concern, actually told me she was concerned that if Donald Trump were president, this is a younger woman, well, she's of age to be a mother. She's afraid that Donald Trump would remove her right to IVF if they're having problems with conception. Now, People actually believe this. Not only do they believe, and Kamala Harris is saying here, he will sign a national abortion ban, which I have a clip of Donald Trump speaking what his agenda will be for abortion. So we'll hear what Trump says himself about that. But even a step further, beyond abortion, they're trying to fearmonger you about IVF, other means of contraception. Michelle Obama at the DNC convention talked about how she needed IVF and she's afraid Trump's going to take that away from women. Tim Walz's wife, Gwen, has made similar comments. Suddenly, IVF became a national conversation. No one was ever going near that. That was not even part of the conversation, but they inserted this to fearmonger you. Let us listen to Donald Trump himself, though. This is his position on abortion and what he would do as president. And again, we can go back to Donald Trump's presidency. I can't wait to do this other episode with the Trump hoaxes, what they say about him. We have 4 years of a Trump presidency to point out the fact that he didn't go after that. He had a Republican-led House and Senate for the first 2 years of his term. He did not go after abortion whatsoever. All he did was return the issue to the states. In my books, that makes you more democratic, less of a threat to democracy, to use the left's own words, even though when you talk about democracy, what does that mean to these folks? What does that mean to anybody? We are not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic. He shrank the size and power of the federal government by returning an important issue to voters to their home states. That is a good thing. We should all celebrate that. And then you, as the resident of that state, again, I hate to belabor this point, but people believe this, so we have to talk about it. If you believe so strongly one way or the other, you can petition at your state level to get things done to reflect your values in that state. The nation is too large, too diverse, and we're always told about diversity is our strength, but when it comes to these issues, you have to believe it, otherwise you're the enemy. Let us listen to what Trump said about abortion himself.
My leadership, the Republican Party will always support the creation of strong, thriving, and healthy American families. We want to make it easier for mothers and families to have babies, not harder. That includes supporting the availability of fertility treatments like IVF in every state in America. Like the overwhelming majority of Americans, including the vast majority of Republicans, conservatives, Christians, and pro-life Americans, I strongly support the availability of IVF for couples who are trying to have a precious baby. What could be more beautiful or better than that? Today, I'm pleased that the Alabama legislature.
All right, then he's going to talk about some other. This was from earlier this summer with Trump talking about that. So again, the Alabama story was big in the news right now. Alabama tried to do things with IVF treatment. That is not the same as what Donald Trump would try to do with IVF treatment. So again, they conflated the issue. Donald Trump clearly stating he has no intention of doing that. As far as Donald Trump is concerned, the issue has been settled. It returned to the states, the issue of abortion, case closed. It is Democrats, it is the media that are still trying to get you to hyperventilate over the fact that he's going to sign a national abortion ban, that Trump abortion bans are running amok in 20 states, that he's going to get rid of your IVF access. Donald Trump, and then I've got clips of J.D. Vance here as well, they are running on the pro-family, not a pro-life message so much as a pro-family message. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance want big families. They want you to have a happy family. They want you to get pregnant. And again, you don't have to believe what he's saying here, but if you're going to believe Kamala Harris's lies, then this is equally valid. This is the politician saying something. And again, we have 4 years of a Trump presidency to point out the fact that he didn't go anywhere near that. I don't think he's going to touch it again. So let us take a look here at, we'll go to Tim Walz for a second because he is Kamala Harris's running mate. This is how Kamala Harris, actually to her credit, said, I will sign Roe is the law of the land. That makes me wonder, though, what is the intention of Democrats? Roe v. Wade, and again, I don't think people understand this or are aware of this. Roe v. Wade was not, you have unlimited access to abortions up until birth, or, and I got clips here of Democrat politicians talking about what happens after birth in the event of a botched abortion, or a woman decides she doesn't want the baby even after it passes through the birth canal. Roe v. Wade had a limit in the third trimester. It said you had a legal right under the United States Constitution that they found through penumbral reasoning. They said, oh, look at that, the 14th Amendment somehow justifies abortion. Roe v. Wade had limitations. It said states could still regulate the third trimester. Roe v. Wade was not a free-for-all in the land of abortion. It had a set of rules that you still had to play by. But that didn't stop Tim Walz, when Roe was overturned, from going even further than Roe. In some ways, like I said earlier, there were more abortions in the year after Roe was overturned than there were under Roe. And in large part, you could make the case that that was because these blue states, Democrat-run states, made abortions available all 9 months, even after, we'll say, the 9th month when the baby was born. This was the interaction between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz at the debate. And again, Kamala said she would codify Roe, which had limitations. The Supreme Court said states could regulate the third trimester. But now this is Tim Walz addressing his own Minnesota abortion laws. What would you expect to see under a Harris-Walz administration? Roe with limitations or unfettered access like Minnesota?
She was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their health care decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals. They get early childhood education. They get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget, Kamala Harris is proposing them.
If you're watching the video here, that was the meme of the Vance look. Like, are you kidding me right now? I'm going to let Walz finish, and then, boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
We are going to fact-check it here. But again, they come out with these, Vance called it a slogan. Tim Walz loves this idea of mind your own business. And look, as someone just looking from the outside in, I look at Democrat politicians. I look at what Tim Walz did during the COVID pandemic when he made it illegal essentially to go to the gym, to open your place of business if you're a small business owner, to worship at a church. You basically work from home, which, silver lining, has been a fantastic thing, actually. We don't have to sit in traffic, waste time in a cubicle. But Tim Walz's COVID policies were absolutely tyrannical. He did not want you to mind your own business when and we'll talk about COVID too in the Trump episode itself, but there was nothing about minding your own business during the COVID pandemic. It was, you will do this, and if you're a small business owner that tries to stay open because that is your livelihood, we will toss you in jail. So no business there. If I'm a parent in Minnesota trying to mind my own business and raise children in a way that I think is most appropriate and healthy, and say, I'm sorry, Johnny, you are not Susan. In Tim Walz's Minnesota, that child could be removed from my home if I don't, quote, affirm their trans identity. That is the opposite of mind your own business. They say these things when it sounds nice, and when it comes to the issue of abortion, your body, your choice, mind your own business, but they don't apply that rule anywhere else. And so J.D. Vance was asking about the Minnesota law. Let's pull this up here. We have a clip of the abortion law. This is going to probably come up really small on my screen. No, that's not too bad if you're live. So you can see, if you're watching the video, they've crossed out language that is pretty important. They cross out the word medical care. They cross out born alive infant. They cross out at the very bottom, preserve the life and health of the born alive infant. Let us actually read one of the passages J.D. Vance was referencing when he asked Tim Walz very plainly, correct me if I'm wrong, Governor, your state allows unlimited access to abortion and could be interpreted to mean that we would allow babies to die on the operating table. So here's the Minnesota law as written here. I'm going to read the updated one. I'm not going to read the parts that are crossed out, edited if it were. An infant who is born alive shall be fully recognized as a human person and accorded immediate protection under the law. All reasonable measures consistent with good medical practice, including the compilation of appropriate medical records, shall be taken by the responsible medical personnel to care for the infant who is born alive. It is this last sentence that is going to provide cover, and Minnesota is now regarded, this is not me saying this, this is what pro-abortion activists are saying, it's one of the most secure havens for abortion in this country, and this last sentence is why. I'm going to read what it used to say, and I'll reread again what it says now. All reasonable measures consistent with good medical practice, including the compilation of appropriate medical records, shall be taken by the responsible medical personnel, and it used to say to preserve the life and health of the born alive infant. They crossed out preserve the life and health of the born alive infant, and now simply say shall be taken by the responsible medical personnel to care for the infant who is born alive. Nothing is done by accident. They could have kept to preserve the life of the infant, but instead they removed that and simply to care for the infant who is born alive. What does care mean? Well, that's open to interpretation. We have an article here. Let me see if I've got this somewhere close. I wanted to read a passage here. This is from The Hill. The Hill is not a far-right conservative outlet here. After this law went into effect, I got to click on the ad. I apologize for that. This is what happens when you do a live show. We wanted to get to a part here. Okay, fast forward a couple years now. This is under Governor Walz's leadership in Minnesota. Between January of 2019 and December 2022, the Minnesota Department of Health recorded and reported 8 cases in which infants were born alive during abortion procedures. None of the children survived. Moreover, of 5 born alive cases between January 1 and December 31 of 2021, the Minnesota Department of Health said no measures taken to preserve life were reported for 3 of them. And this is actually before what they say was the fall of Roe. Interesting as you go to Minnesota statutes here, listen to this as well. A fetal death must be registered or reported within 5 days of the death of a fetus for whom 20 or more weeks of gestation have elapsed, except for abortions. Let me read that again. A fetal death must be registered and reported within 5 days of the death of a fetus for whom 20 or more weeks of gestation have elapsed, except for abortion. Now, Minnesota's abortion law also made it so that no one will be denied an abortion. You could be from the state of Minnesota, travel to the state of Minnesota. If you get it done in Minnesota as an out-of-state resident, you will not be prosecuted. Let's say you come from Alabama to get one. We won't send you back to Alabama for prosecution. You can come here, whatever your state's laws say, and Minnesota taxpayers will be on the hook for that. Now, I would like to mind my own business. In a perfect world, I don't think this is an issue at all. I don't think people are having abortions. Hillary Clinton said in the 90s it should be safe, legal, and rare. It is hard for me to mind my own business, though, when my tax dollars in the state of Minnesota pay for these procedures. So Tim Walz avoided the issue. He lied about the issue. This is Kamala Harris's running mate, about what his Minnesota law actually said. There is a gray area, and as I just reported from The Hill, this was their investigation, 8 babies in a span of 3 years were born alive after the procedure, but none of them survived. They said that euphemistically. You can fill in the gaps. What do you think happened to those 8 babies who there was no mandate to preserve the life and health of those? They were just cared for, Okay. We could spend a lot of time on abortion. That is not the point of the show here. The point is just to point out how Kamala Harris lies. And I hope we did a good job showing you how Kamala Harris misspoke, to put it gently, about Donald Trump's agenda for abortion at the national level. She talks about a national abortion ban. That is not true. Donald Trump did not say that. She talked about banning IVF. That is even more untrue. Donald Trump said he wants to have big families. He's running a pro-family agenda. How do you get families? In many cases, you have to use IVF nowadays. Okay, but let us get back to more Kamala Harris lies. And if you're watching live, again, let me know in the comments below, am I misstating anything? Am I wrong about any of this so far? I would love your comments on there. And again, if you're watching after the fact, let me know over on Spotify or over on Rumble, where this video is going to be uploaded and recorded. I'm going to go back in time a little bit. Again, we had so many videos to get through. I want to talk about J.D. Vance's response really fast because we missed this part where this would have been appropriate. But I'm going to pop this in here. Again, we talked about Kamala Harris running on day one. J.D. Vance makes a great case for that. Let's play this, and then we'll move on with our next lie here.
My friends, I was actually yesterday with my dear friend Katie Britt, senator from Alabama, and both of us have been in politics for all of 2 years. And we were talking about how shameless these politicians are, where I guess if you've been in office for 30 years, like Kamala Harris, you can stand up and without an ounce of shame, look at the American people and say, on day one, I'm going to lower grocery prices. That's what Kamala Harris says. And on day one, we're going to lower the price of housing. And on day one, we're going to close down that southern border. It's like, Kamala, day one was 1,400 days ago. What the hell have you been doing the whole time? Why don't you stop talking and get to work?
Again, kind of wanted to bookend the previous conversation. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, if they wanted to do something about the border, about inflation, about crime in this country, they could do something about that. The border especially. Just don't let all these people in. Instead, they rescinded Trump's executive orders and they made it easier for people to come in, many of them criminals. And then when Donald Trump talks about an enemy within, referring to illegal criminals who are committing violent acts against Americans, he is the bad guy. Do you see how this works? Okay. We got to get to this one. This was an easy one to debunk as well. They are bringing back the bloodbath hoax. The bloodbath hoax, which we have the clip of Donald Trump speaking, it is on par with the Fine People hoax. We can listen to Donald Trump live, saying the words in the context, and you will see how the media and Democrat politicians are distorting that. So here's Kamala Harris actually in 11 seconds, I think it is, getting in two big whoppers. So let's listen to Kamala with her next two lies. And then we will get into debunking them.
Since then, that there will be a bloodbath after this election. He has, on your point about the military, referred to members of our military as suckers and losers.
What is it? I think that was 11 seconds. Two whoppers of a lie in 11 seconds. And again, you're thinking, oh yeah, I've heard that one. Donald Trump, he talked about a bloodbath on par with that enemy within. Remember, he was going to mobilize the military to go after American Democrats? That wasn't true. That was going after illegal criminals. And when he talks about the enemy within, there's a case to be made for some of our elected officials and unelected officials in Washington, D.C., not having your best interest in heart. And so I'm going to play it one more time so we can listen to that bloodbath comment, how she frames it up, and then we'll listen to Donald Trump speak.
Has said, since then, that there will be a bloodbath after this election.
A bloodbath after the election. You are meant to believe that when Kamala Harris wins, if Kamala Harris wins, that Donald Trump and his supporters will be all agitated, riled up, and there's going to be chaos and violence and a bloodbath in the streets. That is what she is saying. That's what she wants you to believe. When you hear the word bloodbath, you're thinking violent actions, death, chaos, destruction. Kind of reminds me of the George Floyd riots in 2020. And then I don't even know if we have time to get to Tim Walz's lies today. I was planning on doing that, but we have too much Kamala stuff. So maybe we'll do a part 2 just focusing on Tim Walz. But he let BLM do whatever they wanted in Minneapolis, denied National Guard support. Mayor Jacob Frey of Minneapolis wanted National Guard help. Donald Trump wanted to bring in National Guard help. Tim Walz denied it all. Let them burn down police precincts. Let them loot, rob. People were murdered in that era. But no, Donald Trump wants to mobilize the military against you, the American citizen, and there's going to be a bloodbath because his supporters, remember January 6th? His supporters are so violent, they killed a police officer, and they're going to kill Kamala supporters next. But here is the actual context of bloodbath. This is Donald Trump in full, unedited. You decide for yourself if he was talking about having his supporters get agitated and commit violent acts in the streets, or if he was talking about something else.
Mexico has taken, over a period of 30 years, 34% of the automobile manufacturing business in our country. Think of it, went to Mexico. China now is building a couple of massive plants where they're going to build the cars in Mexico and they think that they're going to sell those cars into the United States.
All right, the context was important. That's why I'm letting Trump speak about manufacturing of cars in Mexico. I haven't heard anything yet about I'm going to unleash my supporters in the streets. Let's keep listening.
United States with no tax at the border. Let me tell you something to China. If you're listening, President Xi, and you and I are friends, but he understands the way I deal, those big monster car manufacturing plants that you're building in Mexico right now, and you think you're going to get that, you're going to not hire Americans, and you're going to sell the cars to us now, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole, that's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars. They're building massive factories.
Donald Trump very clearly talking about the automobile manufacturing sector of the United States economy. If Kamala Harris wins and has her policies implemented or carried on, manufacturing centers will face a bloodbath. They won't be able to compete with other nations' ability to make things at a cheaper price. That is what Donald Trump was saying. He was not referring to Trump supporters carrying weapons, going out in the streets, terrorizing you. We have enough of that already under Joe Biden's administration, Kamala Harris's administration, with illegal criminals taking over apartment complexes in Colorado. And again, it's just one or two. That's what Martha Raddatz said to J.D. Vance. It's just a couple of apartment complexes, not a big deal. That is actually happening. We are watching oftentimes young American women, brutally assaulted, raped, murdered at the hands of illegal criminals that should not be here, except we have a wide open southern border. Most Americans would agree. I would guarantee you, as the would-be Democrat voter, you want a secure border. Without a border, you do not have a country. And without confined spaces, without defined territories, you cannot have peace. Otherwise, you are always fighting over land. There will be more peace, there will be more safety if the United States is allowed to exist as one unit. You can't have that definition, though, without a secure border. Otherwise, we are just part of the rest of the world where everyone else gets to come in and do what they want. But Donald Trump, debunking the bloodbath, I think we did an okay job with that. I don't know if there's much else to add on to bloodbath. Kamala Harris wants you to think that it would be violence in the streets with Trump supporters. Donald Trump talks about automobile manufacturing. Like, they're not even close. It's not even like they were directionally true, just a flat out lie. And then, of course, she talks about Project 2025. She talks about suckers and losers that we've got to cover here. The suckers and losers hoax. Let me pull up the Atlantic story where this broke. This was in, let me get a date timestamp on this one. This was from September of 2020. They always talk about an October surprise in elections. What is going to be the big reveal that's going to make you realize, whoops, maybe I don't want to support that person because look at what just came out about them. You will remember the October surprise in 2020 was the Hunter Biden laptop story, which the New York Post broke. Very thorough investigation, all of it factually true. You weren't allowed to share that on Twitter at the time. That was pre-Elon Twitter. Joe Biden came out and flatly denied, even in the debates against Donald Trump, this is Russian disinformation. You had 51 intelligence officers saying that this is Russian disinformation. They signed a letter saying that nothing in this Hunter Biden laptop was true or accurate. Turns out everything about the Biden laptop was real and authentic and true. You were not allowed to believe that, though. You were told something else completely. Again, not even trying to embed some truth in there. They just flat out lied to you about the Hunter Biden story. That was in October. But in September of that year, imagine that, this big story, and I'm going to read the article. This allegedly happened in 2018. Someone sat on this for 2 years and just happened to release the information 2 months outside of the 2020 election. What are the odds? What are the odds that a big story like this would break right before you're going to cast a ballot for Donald Trump? And, oh, I was going to vote for him, but I'm a veteran, and he called my people suckers and losers. I'm going to believe The Atlantic, a far-left outlet, who cite, I'll just read the article. I think they cite 4 unnamed people, but here we go. We're going to read the first 2 paragraphs of The Atlantic before we hit a paywall. When President Donald Trump canceled a visit to the Ain-Marne American Cemetery near Paris in 2018, he blamed rain for the last-minute decision, saying that the helicopter couldn't fly and that the Secret Service wouldn't drive him there. Neither claim was true. Immaterial, but they're already trying to set up 2 different reasons why Trump doesn't want to go commemorate the deceased, the fallen soldiers who died in the European theater in World War II. Continuing on, Trump rejected the idea of the visit because he feared his hair would become disheveled in the rain. They love talking about Donald Trump's hair. And because he did not believe it important to honor American war dead, according to 4 people with firsthand knowledge of the discussion that day. In a conversation with senior staff members on the morning of the scheduled visit, Trump said, "Why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers." In a separate conversation on the same trip, Trump referred to the more than 1,800 Marines who lost their lives at Below Wood as suckers for getting killed. Number 1, this doesn't pass the sniff test if you're being honest. Take Donald Trump's name out of this. And I have a clip of Donald Trump addressing this when he goes on a podcast to be like, did you call them suckers and losers? And again, you can choose to believe Trump or not, but those are his words versus 4 unnamed witnesses. Just like we had 2 unnamed sources telling us that Brian Sicknick was killed when a fire extinguisher hit him on the head. But sure, let's keep believing these unnamed sources when it paints Trump in a bad light. Take away Trump's name, though. Nobody thinks this for a second. I am opposed to all foreign intervention. That is my bias. So now you know I do not want American troops sent overseas to fight in wars in a theater that does not pertain to our best interest at home. I am an isolationist when it comes to foreign policy. That being said, if I were to visit, and I've been over to France, when I visit other cemeteries, when Donald Trump is going over there to see the cemeteries, that is not even a thought process. We've all seen films like Saving Private Ryan. We've seen other war movies. Everyone thinks the same thing. This is awful. These are 18-year-old kids, some of them younger, some of them a little bit older. These are kids getting slaughtered in battle. Now, World War II, I'm not going to get into our World War II stuff right here, but in all of these theaters, whatever you think about the politics of the war, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Gulf War I, Gulf War II, whatever you think of the politics, should we be there? Should we not be there? What was our mission to go to these places? Some of them more worthy than others. Every single time you see a young man or woman killed and you see their grave, you pity them. You feel bad for them. You feel bad for their families. You thank them for their sacrifice. Like, this is not a hard concept. Donald Trump, nobody thinks that they are suckers and losers. Not a single person. You have commanders in chief that just look at soldiers as numbers, saying, okay, we might lose 100 in this battle right here, but we're going to take over this town, so we're doing the math, and that's worth it. They see soldiers as numbers as a commander in chief. They execute that decision. People get killed in the mission. That's a collateral damage as far as they're concerned. But you and me, and Donald Trump, I'm going to add in this conversation as well, doesn't even cross his mind to consider them suckers and losers. Like, nobody thinks that. You immediately feel bad for them. You think their entire life was ahead of them, and now it got wiped away. You think about their surviving family members back home. They'll never get to see them again. Okay? Well, this doesn't even make sense here. But again, I had to point out the timestamp on this. It's equally important to realize that this was released in 2020 in the fall, right before the main election, after they sat on information for 2 years. But let us get into Trump speaking about that himself. He was asked directly about the suckers and losers comment. And so let's get his take on this. And again, we are a live show and we are trying to find the right clip for this right now. Bear with me for 1 second. Gosh, I don't know if we have this here actually. That's unfortunate. But while we're scrolling, one thing I was remiss to point out the fact that Donald Trump on January 6th, we'll go back to this as well, and then we'll finish up with our last lies here. Yeah, I don't know if I have the Trump suckers and losers count. That's unfortunate. I'm going to go back to January 6th, though, when they say Trump incited an insurrection. We're going to listen to Donald Trump himself at the rally, kind of like the fine people, kind of like the bloodbath comments. Donald Trump said some things that you simply didn't hear. You saw a different part of the speech that was able to be used to frame up an idea. But this is how Donald Trump spoke to his protesters. And I've got two videos. One of them was the actual rally that got aired. The other one was a video he put on Twitter that got taken down because, again, Twitter working alongside the government, and we have proof of that now with the Twitter files. The government used social media companies to help frame narratives. Here's Donald Trump speaking about peacefully making your voice heard.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard today.
Peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Again, you can look at that and say, I don't like Donald Trump already because of everything they've said about him, even though we're debunking a lot of the Trump lies at the same time as going through the Kamala Harris lies. Maybe you still don't like him. Maybe you don't believe him when he says this. But this is not the language used to incite an insurrection. Go protest peacefully. And then ask yourself, how many Trump rallies have devolved into madness like this? How many? Just one? And it came right as they were trying to verify or push through the election results. Don't ask questions. 2020 was the most safe and secure election ever, says Nancy Pelosi. Even though national elections by design are not meant to be audited, not meant to be known. We can do a separate conversation, a separate episode on the election security or lack thereof. But just understand there is no mechanism to audit elections. You take the word of the government in this case and say, oh, it was secure. Joe Biden won. Don't ask questions. And then when people do have questions about the election, okay, we can't have Donald Trump asking questions. We can't have people asking questions. We don't want Trump to run for re-election in 2024. Let's say he started an insurrection. Let's use a clause in the Constitution from the Civil War era to make sure that an insurrectionist rebel cannot run for and hold office again. But here's the amazing thing. That was before the protests. And actually, if you want to timestamp the insurrection, Trump is speaking while some of that chaos is already unfolding. So he's giving his speech. When he catches wind of what is going on, again, this is a video he posted to Twitter on January 6th, but that Twitter removed. I guarantee you have not seen this video.
I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
Now, you might listen to that and your only takeaway is he questioned the integrity of the 2020 election. That makes him bad. I'm not going to listen to anything else he says. Just understand, though, that Donald Trump, for a second time here, wanted people to be peaceful. And in this case, he wanted them to go home, stop the chaos at the Capitol building. And again, if you're going to be mad about questioning the results of 2020, just take a little trip back in time and go to 2016. I should have pulled up the clip for this one. Should have pulled up a clip of Kamala Harris saying, oh, Donald Trump questioned the election results of 2020. How can we trust him ever again on anything? In 2016, every major Democrat, Hillary Clinton included, the Democrat presidential nominee, said that the election was stolen. She questioned the integrity of the election. Putin stole it. Trump was a Putin asset. Russia, 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 which was also debunked. We'll get to that in the Trump episode. You're allowed to question election results except for 2020. And again, we've pointed out lies, and we've also coupled that with the hypocrisies. They say these things, but they don't really believe it. Because if I'm not allowed to question the 2020 results, why are you allowed to question the 2016 results? Again, take the partisan hat off. Just look at what's happening on the ground. Some elections you can contest, others you cannot. And weirdly, it's the ones that Democrats win you're not allowed to question, and you get removed from social media companies. You get taken off of Facebook if you say, 2020 was stolen. But 2016, Democrats all day long can say Trump was stealing the election with the help of Vladimir Putin, and that is totally fine. Totally fine. I think the last thing we got to get to is, well, this is a good one too. I got one more Tim Walz clip for us, and then we're going to wrap this up. This is going on an hour and a half, and Again, let me know in the comments. Let me know what I missed. I know there are more Kamala Harris lies. Some of these, though, were just low-hanging fruit. And I wanted to do this episode to really prompt the question inside of would-be Democrat voters' heads. If they lied to me about Charlottesville, if they lied to me about the bloodbath, if they lied to me about suckers and losers, if they lied to me about all of these other issues, what else are they lying to me about? And that's the question we should all be asking ourselves. If the media, as The View said, needs to do a better job of covering Kamala Harris, what does that mean? Kamala is cratering in the polls right now. That's not a partisan opinion. That is a fact. The betting markets love Donald Trump right now. Polls show Donald Trump leading in every single swing state. But The View thinks when you say that, you are hurting Kamala Harris. They need to do a better job of reframing the truth somehow so that you are led to believe that Kamala Harris is the better candidate. That's where we're at this point. Okay, we got one more to go through here. We got to talk about Project 2025. And I don't know if I have a Kamala clip talking about that, but we've all heard it. If you're in Democrat circles, if you're on social media especially, you're getting told over and over again that Donald Trump wants to implement Project 2025, this far-right organization, the Heritage Center, that wanted to ban abortion, that wanted to do all sorts of other things that are so horrible to our democracy, and Trump supports it. Trump believes it. Well, here's Donald Trump talking about Project 2025.
Like some on the right, severe right, came up with this Project 25, and I don't even know. I mean, some of them I know who they are, but they're very, very conservative, just like you have. They're sort of the opposite of the radical left, okay? You have the radical left, and you have the radical right, and they come up.
Again, you don't have to believe him, but Donald Trump calls them out as the radical right. He's going to continue. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it.
With this, I don't know what the hell it is. It's Project 25. He's involved in Project, and then they read some of the things, and they are extreme. I mean, they're seriously extreme. But I don't know anything about it. I don't want to know anything about it. But what they do is misinformation and disinformation, and they keep saying, he's a threat to democracy. I'm saying, what the hell did I do for democracy? Last week, I took a bullet for democracy. What did I do against democracy?
Again, maybe you're not inclined to believe Donald Trump, but there he is in his own words. I don't know anything about Project 2025. I don't want to know anything about it. It was this far-right group that pushed this out, these radical righties. What else do you want to say? But they will tell you over and over again, that is their agenda, their platform, their aim is to say Project 2025 and Donald Trump. Because remember, it didn't stick. They went with racist and white supremacist and Nazi and Hitler. And look where that led us. It led us to 2 assassination attempts. And they said, do you think they paused and reflected and said, our rhetoric is getting too outrageous because we have riled up people. Boy, we talk about bloodbath in the street if Donald Trump loses, but we are witnessing a bloodbath in real time with 2 assassination attempts at Donald Trump because he gets labeled as Hitler so often. Of course you would take out Hitler if you had the chance. That you'd be morally obligated to take out Hitler if you had the chance. They don't tone down their rhetoric, though, even though they know exactly what is happening with that. But there he is, Project 2025, and no idea what it is. Democrats will run on that. But again, I want to present Donald Trump's side, too, because you likely haven't heard him disavow Project 2025 like he disavowed neo-Nazis and white supremacists. All right, we got to get to one more lie here. We are running long. That's okay, because the more information we get out there, the better. Maybe one of these will stick. We're throwing noodles at the wall. I just need one to stick, to plant a seed in your head to say, hold on a second. The media has not been honest. Kamala Harris has not been honest with me. Here she is in the Brett Baier interview one more time, getting asked about lying about Joe Biden's mental decline. Kamala Harris, for 3.5 years, served under Joe Biden, certainly would have interacted with him, certainly would have come to some conclusions about his mental fitness, his growing dementia. Let's see how she handles this question, though, of like, how can I trust you, Kamala Harris, on anything else if you lied to us about this issue?
Call Donald Trump. He's misguided. You say now
he's unstable. He is unstable, Brett.
He's not well. You say he's mentally not stable.
He's not stable.
Let me ask you this. You told many interviewers.
This is a question I just have for Democrat voters. She's saying it. No doubt you might believe it as well. But what about Donald Trump is unstable? Something substantiated as well, not something the media told you. The media does a very good job of telling you he's an insurrectionist. He's a white supremacist. He's this, he's that. What evidence do you have of him being unstable? Because I see him at rallies every day. I see him working McDonald's, interacting with McDonald's employees, smiling, having a good time. The Donald Trump that I see, and again, I don't see all of Donald Trump, but I see him in public a lot. This is a man that's been in the public sphere his entire life. He was a media and Democrat darling before he ran for president as a Republican. He would go on The View. He would go on Oprah. He had his NBC show. He was chumming it up with Hillary Clinton and all these other big-time Democrats. They loved him. Would they have loved someone that was unstable? Like, did he just become unstable? What evidence do we have of that? And again, just asking the question, something to ponder over, something to think about. Kamala Harris is certainly telling you, like, well, he's Hitler, and nope, now he's unstable too. They wanted you to get worked up over him having the nuclear button, the codes to launch nukes around the world, and then Joe Biden doesn't even know what the football is, but that's okay, apparently.
That Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished?
I'm just going to spoil this for you. Does she answer the question? Let's find out.
Joe Biden, I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room, and he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people.
There were no concerns raised?
Brett, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And Donald Trump
but
is.
You talked about it.
And Donald Trump
After George Clooney said within a few minutes of talking to President Biden at a fundraiser that he thought this was not the same Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage.
Donald Trump is on the ballot.
I understand. You met with him at least once a week for 3.5 years. You didn't have any concerns?
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump, which is why the people who know him best, including leaders of our national security community, have all spoken out, even people who worked for him in the Oval Office.
Okay, this is the appeal to authority. Again, this could be its own episode. They love appealing to authority, well, when it makes their case at least. She is saying that, well, these people in this special government community have all said the same thing. We don't trust Donald Trump. It's almost like, 51 intelligence officers from the intelligence community lying about Hunter Biden. Might these people have an agenda? Might Donald Trump, as a political outsider, he was not part of the establishment when he ran in 2016, but you can go back in time. Mitt Romney, John McCain, George Bush, these guys were nothing if not neocon establishment hacks. They did the bidding of Washington, D.C. Go along to get along. You think you're voting for Republican, Democrat, they're all going to do the same thing. Donald Trump broke that system. He smashed it apart. He couldn't be bought. He didn't see things the same way. I mean, he called out Jeb Bush in 2016 for his brother's invasion of Iraq. Like, this was a man that was built differently and viewed things differently. And that's why his message resonated with so many people. Look, for years, Republicans would begrudgingly vote. Okay, I'm not voting for Democrat. My goodness, I can't vote for Hillary Clinton, so I guess I'm going to vote for Donald Trump because what other option do I have? I mean, I don't want to vote for John Kerry, so okay, W, you can get reelected again. Like, we voted begrudgingly. Donald Trump changed all of that. There is an enthusiasm for voting for Donald Trump that has never existed before in the GOP. For the first time, and Donald Trump broke promises. He said he would build a wall when he ran in 2016. The wall never materialized. Like I said at the beginning, all politicians lie. They say what they need to get elected in. But by and large, Trump's message resonates with so many people. They're excited for something different. He's not pandering to them. Kamala Harris, I don't know what's going on the screen behind us here. Kamala Harris asked plainly, though, what's going on? Can you tell us the truth? You saw Joe Biden. How can we trust you with this? You lied to us about Joe Biden's health. Doesn't answer the question. And then I'm going to capstone this episode today with this. Kamala Harris talks about Donald Trump being a threat to democracy. Kamala Harris, every Democrat, most of the media pundits that you're watching, social media, they all say the same thing. Trump is this amalgamation of Hitler and Stalin and Mussolini and all the worst human beings in the history of the world. Trump is all of them combined. Oh, what do you mean there's another assassination attempt? Don't worry about the rhetoric here. Trump is all of these bad things, threat to democracy. The Democrats in this last election cycle had Joe Biden basically run uncontested in their primaries. Every voter basically said, I want Joe Biden to be the next nominee. Now, we get to the June debate. There's never been a debate before the conventions. You do the RNC, you do the DNC, you pick your presidential nominee, and you run them out 3 times on the debate stage, and you hear what they have to offer. Democrats knew that Joe Biden was slipping. He was not popular in the polls because how could you be with his administration? That's the reason Kamala Harris is slipping too, because she can't distance herself from Joe Biden. Nobody wanted this administration to have a second term. Add to that, though, Democrats had a get out of jail card. They could simply say, look, you don't like Joe Biden's policies, but we're going to put him on the debate stage and you're going to see that Joe Biden is senile. So now we can run this new candidate basically offering the same policies. And she said as much. I wouldn't change anything different if I were Joe Biden. But we're going to run a new candidate to make you forget about all that. Let's just go with Joe Biden is senile now. You saw him on the debate stage in June. And then without a single primary vote, Kamala Harris was hand-selected by Democrats to be the new presidential nominee. You, as the Democrat voter, did not cast a vote for her. She was hand-selected, hand-picked, and the only word to describe that is a coup. We talked about the insurrection being a coup, an attempt to overthrow the government. What you witnessed in the Democrat Party was a coup, and you might not like to hear those words, but there's no other way to describe it. Joe Biden was selected by Democrat voters to be their nominee, and the party disregarded all of that. They ignored the will of their base, and they said, we are not having Joe Biden on the ticket anymore. Now we are running Kamala Harris. And with that, folks, it is, goodness, an hour and 41 minutes here. I don't think we covered all the lies, but we have got to stop here. We didn't even get to Tim Walz. There's so much to talk about. Tim Walz's lies getting exposed. And I got to say, as a native Minnesotan, I didn't know most of this. Minnesota media did a great job covering it up. But the theme is this. Kamala Harris will lie all the time. And I am not saying this to ignore what Donald Trump says. That wasn't the point of the episode. The point, though, is specifically for our Democrat voters out there just to come to terms with the fact that their boogeyman, Donald Trump, for all the lies he says, and you could break that down and say it's really hyperbole and exaggeration. It's on the right path towards truth. Kamala Harris, though, we played countless clips of her flat out lying. She misrepresented what Donald Trump said. She misrepresents her positions. Kamala Harris straight up lies about the truth. No officers died on January 6th. Donald Trump did not call neo-Nazis fine people. Donald Trump referenced the car manufacturing sector as facing a bloodbath if Kamala Harris wins because of her tariffs and her policies on economics, not a violent protest in the streets. Suckers and losers. Look, we don't have definitive proof on that. You've got a few people saying, anonymous sources, that he said that. But then you've got Donald Trump with the support of at least 26 first-hand witnesses saying that never happened. And hey, you just got to put it on the sniff test. Does this smell like it makes sense? Like, no, nobody would disparage soldiers like that. Least of all Donald Trump. Like, you're a politician. Let's say he actually thinks that. But as a politician, you gain nothing by admitting that. So you would lie about it still. You still wouldn't say it even if you believed it, because the political fallout would be so enormous, as we are seeing here. So no, that didn't happen. They misrepresent their positions on abortion. They misrepresent their positions on fracking, on getting tough on the border. They have no idea what they're talking about when they're running on a day one campaign. You've had 1,400 days, as JD Vance said. I'm glad I snuck that clip in there. This episode was hopefully a little wake-up call to say the things you are being told by the media. I would say the media is largely more responsible than Kamala Harris herself, because look, The View said that the media needs to do a good job covering for Kamala Harris. But Kamala Harris goes out on the debate stage. She goes out in rallies. She does these television interviews, and she lies to you. Everything she says is almost a lie. I don't think that's an exaggeration. So we have some decisions to make. If you have not yet voted, I hope this episode, at least in part, is getting you to wonder, what else are they lying to me about? Because a lot of the narratives you've been told have framed your perception of Donald Trump are simply not true. But we will be back on Thursday at 9:30 Central. We have so much more to get into. I think we're going to push back our series because we've got to get to the Tim Wall lies next. So that's going to be our next episode. Come back Thursday at 9:30 Central. We're going to go through all of Tim Walz's lies. And I think we still have to talk about McDonald's too. But thanks for tuning in. If you like this content, please follow us on Rumble. Share it with your friends, and especially share it with your friends, family members, neighbors. I don't think I was mean in this episode. I'm trying to present the truth as accurately as I can. I'm trying to present these issues as accurately as I can. Yes, I'm going to be voting for Donald Trump enthusiastically. I will be voting for Donald Trump like this country depends on it, because I think it does. But I wanted to present this information in a way that gives you pause and says, Kamala Harris lied again. With that, folks, we're getting out of here. Thanks for tuning in. Share this content if you found it valuable, and we are back, like I said, Thursday at 9:30. We'll see you then.